Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Randy here with Academia Christi, and this is the launch, the introduction of the Viri Christi gardening vlog. And this will be the first episode along with an introduction. And please just bear with me because this is going to cover several months worth of activity, whereas all the future episodes are just going to be a weekly update on what's going on. Firstly, with the indoor garden, because it's winter time right now, but eventually also with what's going on in the outdoor gardens. And most of the good stuff is going to be toward the beginning, so whenever you get bored, feel free to just stop. And there will also be chapters throughout the video that you can skip to if you want to see anything specific from the first part of the video whenever I get into really the vlog part and break it down plant by plant what's going on. And also bear in mind, while I did cut this back substantially, it is long, but since it's a vlog, it's actually supposed to be kind of lengthy as I'm sort of explaining every week what I'm doing. Although again, as I said, this one is kind of condensed because it's going through several months worth of growing. And without further ado, here is the first episode of the Viri Christi gardening vlog, all the way from the middle of November until now. Okay, so things started with a desire to grow some grapes back in November. Here's some indoor grapes, and not too sure, but it's not be a shoot now. It doesn't growing like a weed does with seed weeds and things. March update on where the grapes are. The outdoor one doesn't look so hot, but that sprung the desire to do a lot of other things. We have a bunch of herbs growing at first. In the middle of November, a bunch of hot peppers started as well. And things were going, pretty well. There's some arugula right off the bat. Some thyme that died pretty quickly. Strawberries, I don't think they were really strawberries, but that's what was planted in there. I have a couple of cucumbers that were growing. The hot pepper is coming up nicely. A lot of very leggy plants, though. I didn't have very good sun or other light, and you can see the arugula sort of getting eaten. And then I had to leave for a while, and unfortunately when I came back, most things were dead. Those chives, the garlic chives were okay. Everything else basically gone, just those few peppers. You saw the oregano actually started coming back this transplant. All the spearmint leaves fell off, and then new shoots started coming up, so that was nice. I replanted some basil, but that ended up dying pretty quickly. So really, this is at the end of December, all we were looking at, kind of. A few hot peppers still. We had a few cucumbers growing. Bell peppers that were harvested from a real bell pepper, and now we have 3 cucumbers that were transplanted into this big pot. But after my birthday, I received this beautiful little hydroponic system and began growing these, as you can see, jalapenos, cayennes, and some strawberries in there. And quickly the hot peppers took off. The strawberries failed, unfortunately. It did not take long to realize how much I loved growing peppers, just growing things in general, but these peppers were really taking off, as you can see in this unit. I waited way too long to take them out. They were already starting to flower, as you can see. And this was about a month in after planting it on December 19th, and then transplanted about a month later into these pots, you can see. And as I was doing that, there were, of course, other things still growing. All those herbs that I had replanted. The transplants still doing their thing. The oregano slowly kind of dying back. My pretty dog. And I do have some stuff growing out in our garage too. I'll be getting more into those later. And of course there's only one of the tricumbers left. The youngest, but it's still going. Transplanted all the sage that remained, and there was only 3 of them into the 3 pots you saw down there. And now we actually start into February with some more serious
gardening, you could say, indoors. Here's what I'm using: the potting mix and the seed starting mix. That's the potting mix you see in there with the peppers. The 2 cayennes here first, growing pretty nicely, I'd say, together. And this is, 4 weeks ago now? My big, beautiful jalapeno, the biggest one from the hydroponics I put in this pot by itself here. This was, of course, the one that was flowering first. And I did pluck those first flowers off just to let it grow a little bigger, this and the cayenne. But you can see there's tons of flowers already started again on it. Didn't take very long for that. They're growing just amazingly, even this very small cayenne. In fact, it was cut back, as you can see. I guess I don't have pictures and videos from just before that happened, but these 2 smaller cayennes, I had to cut back some of the leaves. In fact, I went even further back than that because of some nutrient burn. Obviously my fault, but you live and learn. This is part of the process, is learning a lot of different things about the plants in the winter time, so that when spring and summer come around, I have a little bit of experience. You can see there the big cayenne pepper, the biggest of the 3. Of course, it already has its flowers too at this point. It may have even been flowering more than the jalapeno. They're kind of in a race right now, I would say. And now 2 weeks ago, that is, you see, I would say some substantial growth, especially on these first 2 jalapenos here. You can see some flowers that I actually let go on those. I figured it was about time. They're actually, at this point, you can see some leaf curling there at the top too. Not too sure what that's about. But they're actually as big as this jalapeno in the middle. So I figured it was time to let them flower as well. And as you can see, this one, there's the method of pollinating the jalapenos, or the other hot peppers as well. Just tapping them a little bit to let the pollen fall from the flower onto the female part. And it's pollinated. And there's one, a little bit of close up on the first one that I had successfully pollinated. It's hard to tell, but that wilting of the flower is what gives it away sometimes. This cayenne, it also has some pollinated flowers at this point, I believe. But one thing I noticed with this one is it has a lot of flower drop, just in general. That one I'm kind of looking right there may have even been one that fell. Actually, I think that's one that got pollinated, as you'll see later on. Now you can see how far back I had to cut this medium-sized cayenne here. But all that top growth is pretty much new. Didn't take very long for them to bounce back. They're quite resilient plants when you have them indoors like this. And again, here, very small cayenne cut back to, what is that, 6 leaves, and easily coming back, shooting off in all directions now. And here we are last week, again with our 2 jalapenos. You can see 2 flowers starting on the right there, one on the front one on the back one. There are other flowers as well, but those by far the furthest along. You can see there, structurally they look really nice, as far as I can tell. I think they all have 3 branches, 3 prongs coming off of the main stem. Here again is that small cayenne. You can see how much it's coming back. I mean, those leaves are going crazy up there. It too is, I think, building a 3-pronged stem at the top there. Here's that middle-sized one, looking at that goofy-looking leaf. Again, growing back really nicely. All that stuff is fresh growth from the previous week. You can see how far up it started going, yeah. Now back to our lovely big cayenne, which is growing in an interesting way. It's growing away from the window light. You can see those 2 big branches that are coming toward the camera there. I'm not sure why it wants to grow that way, not the other. It might have something to do with being planted with those other 2 cayenne, though. But it's working out pretty well. That branch I was just shaking, in fact, has 3 pollinated flowers on it. You can see that one in the back. It was actually about to fall off. Here is the biggest one that I have. This is 2 weeks ago, or this is 1 week ago at this point. And so we have some, look at that nice, lovely big leaf. That jalapeno is very, very solid now. I mean, it's by far the biggest one. It almost looks like it's a tree at this point. These 3 jalapeno, or these 3 pots, I should say, these are going to continue to be indoor peppers. They're going to stay in here. I'm going to attempt to have some hot peppers growing year round. These are mostly spring, I guess you could say, my spring peppers. The summer ones will, obviously, they're already started. We'll see those shortly. Here's the biggest of my peppers, a cayenne, as you can see, in its growth over the days. Very quickly growing. I think right now it's up to like 4 inches probably. And now, finally, today, the 9th. Amazing growth again on both of these. This cayenne, the medium-sized one, is flowering. I don't want it to yet, but you can tell how vigorous it is. It's looking really nice, even though it's a little misshapen. Very green, very vibrant. Look at how long that branch is. And of course, our big cayenne. The nice morning sun hitting the leaves. I was hoping it wasn't too bad time of day to be doing this. It actually seemed like it worked out pretty well. Let's see our smaller pepper there growing. A couple other ones, and of course our giant, or at least the furthest one along. I guess it's not all that big, but it's looking good. I can't wait to eat it. And those are 2 small jalapenos, that is. Again, you can see they flowered already. And so now they're in the process of pollination. And again, they do have some other flowers growing, but those 2 are the only open ones at the moment. But they seem to be spreading out flower-wise as much as this jalapeno is in the middle. This one, you can see the fruit setting is all over the tree. That cayenne is all on one branch, in fact. This jalapeno is just all over the thing. Each branch has, I would say, probably 2 or more growing on it right now. There's one of the bigger ones. Very excited to try my first fruits. You can see a couple little ones too. They're all over the place. It's just loaded with them. Again, structurally, this pepper just looks amazing. Now, of course, I was doing other hydroponics plants during this time. There's a list of a bunch of herbs I was working with. There's a dill that got transplanted out of hydroponics. Obviously, you can see it was doing just as well as the peppers were in there, along with the Genovese basil and some Italian basil as well. The Genovese, though, you can see 3 different seeds all germinated. I think all of them did. The Italian basil, just the one, but it was nice, stocky, thick. All 3 of them were looking really good. Soon after, planted a couple other things. In fact, I planted more hot peppers, 2 poblanos in the top corners and the Anaheim chili in the bottom right. 2 weeks ago, had some decent growth. You see the parsley back there. In the middle, you see the marjoram. And I believe that was some thyme in the middle growing. And dill still looking amazing. Even after the transplant, it was growing pretty well. You can see I cut out the smaller one. Here's the Italian basil. seems to be getting a lot leggier after the transplant. This one as well, the Genovese basil, very leggy. And also, I cut one of the 3 out. Now there's just the 2, and of course that one's going to go soon. Last week, you see the parsley is just growing very vigorously up there. Marjoram not looking too bad. There's a couple others that seem like they stalled out a little bit. I ended up transplanting all those out into makeshift containers just to see what they would do. But the parsley was good, going well. The marjoram obviously going well. The peppers as well, no problem there. And the Anaheim chili, as you can see, yes, looks like it's probably going to end up being just as good as those other peppers I planted earlier. Again, back to the basil, looking pretty leggy, but they're starting to grow again. You see those next sets of true leaves coming out there that were actually started when I transplanted them, but now they're getting a little bigger. And there's the final piece of the Genovese basil that I cut out, the straggler. And I'm hoping that it'll grow some roots in that water. And there's the dill finally. Another shoot of that growing out. Did a couple more changes in the hydroponics, as I said, transplanted all those things out, so mostly covered everything back up. Parsley's out of there. The marjoram growing well. It's probably going to be transplanted by the next video. These peppers might also. The poblanos growing a little slower, but and these are 2 new ones I have here. Yeah, that's a chili down there in the corner. A Hungarian wax pepper, in fact. And there, of course, are Anaheim chili, growing quite well. That'll probably be out by the next time. And the last look at our basil and the dill, where it's at. Seems like the legginess has stopped. It has some pretty good supplemental light now. So, and that parsley is just, the parsley's going wild. Look how beautiful it is. There is 2 parsleys growing in there. One of them is not very big though. And again, you see the dill. 4 shoots. There's in fact one more little shoot. There he is, growing out there. Again, pretty vigorous growth. Now for the seed starting. See, on the 22nd, I planted these hot peppers. Got some jalapenos, some Hungarian hot wax, and some serranos, which I recently found out were like mini jalapenos, but apparently much hotter. So I was pretty excited about that. This is my, again, makeshift container. Can fill that thing up with water to water the plants from below. And just like I'm doing here with these 2 habaneros, we'll look at, there's my little seed starting light. Yeah. So my more makeshift containers for the habaneros, little bottom watering lids. It's a little harder. It would have been better if I put them on the edges where those, where the ridges are. Give a little more water flow between it and the cup. You see my few little holes I gave it. Probably not enough, but it's working. And now for the actual seed starting units that I have. These nice burpee, 16 slot units. Here we have some celery started. I believe this was 22nd or 23rd again. And this is with potting soil, actually. I filtered out the bigger things, the bigger pieces. Tried to make it work. Not so bad. And you see the onions on the right. That's actually with seed starting mix. So they are different. That's what the color difference is, I would say, between them. And they're in, again, my other makeshift container. Just a nice tote. The 25th for the celery. And here's some other seed starting units I got. Very nice little 12 slot containers. Got little vents on the top and everything. You really can't beat it. I mean, it's pretty sturdy for the price. It was like maybe $1 per. It was about $24 for 24 of them. And I'm doing this pepper brand experiment because I have bought several different brands of hot peppers, and they all, of course, had jalapenos, cayenne, and habanero in them. So I'm doing 3 different sets of these. You can see jalapeno, cayenne, and habanero. And I'm doing, of course, one for each of the brands: that Nature's Edge, Sustainable Sprout, Serenaseed, and Rebel Gardens. Those are what I have right now, just Amazon brands. And I'm going to be doing 3 of them. I'm starting 1 tray every week. You can see I have the second there. The day before this video was taken, began that one. And that little mark there is a guide to make sure that I have the front on at the front. So I have everything where it's supposed to be, especially for an experiment like this. There you see the 3/9 and the March 16th containers I have ready to go, empty. And now for those other peppers that I started in this makeshift unit. Jalapenos and serranos are coming up pretty nicely. These are all, if I remember correctly, these are more of the Nature's Edge seeds, which are the first type I got, and mostly all the peppers are those. These habaneros, I believe, are also Nature's Edge. All the ones I had very early on in the egg cartons were also theirs, and they've been germinating at a pretty good rate. I've been happy with them. The habanero, you see, aren't quite growing yet. This is maybe getting on about a week after I planted them. So hopefully we'll see those sprout soon. You see there a little jalapeno flower sitting next to them. I think they just look so nice. Here's another experiment I have starting in the seed starting division. This is the Bonchi or bonsai chili experiment. These fish peppers and the Ring of Fire cayenne peppers are 2 small varieties and apparently good for the Bonchi. So got those and we'll see how they go. But I do have some other ideas for them. Here you see we have the celery and the onions. Onions were the second. There's my little wet erase marker. I like to use the wet erase because it stays better. You can write wherever you want, basically, just wipe it right off. But 6 days for the germination of these yellow Spanish onions. And what was it, 10 days for that celery there. But it came up really nicely, even in the potting soil. Bear that in mind, this is just potting soil. Again, I did sift out all the bigger pieces, and there you see all the onions coming up. I would say I already had, this is probably not quite half of the onions, but at this point, half of the onions have come up. And finally, a couple days ago, planted this little bib lettuce, and you can see there's actually a sprout already on that. 2 days later, I didn't notice that. I noticed it on the 10th. But on the 9th, no, I didn't know that it had already sprouted 2 days later. That's amazing. I also have this one tomato that I've begun. It's my very first tomato. It's kind of an experiment, I guess. Again, just to prepare myself for what I'm going to encounter with all the other tomatoes I plant. There'll probably be maybe 2 of those seed starting trays full of different tomatoes. And here you see all the other things I've begun for the year. These are going to be mostly things that go outside or get sold to, friends and family. You can see a lot of different herbs, kind of focusing on herbs, spices, things that I can. This is a farm town where I live, so a bunch of the bigger vegetables and things like that. That's really taken care of. The cabbage, even the lettuce, any veggies really. We have a plethora around this area. So my thing's more, I'm more interested in doing fruiting things, not necessarily just fruits, but berries and fruit trees will be coming later. But for now, the only thing I can really focus on for year 1 is these fruiting vegetables like the hot peppers, the cucumbers that will be planted later, and tomatoes. You see here the habanero still not growing. A little disappointing, but I'm hoping they'll still come up. I love those little seed starting units, just upside down cashew containers. They work so perfectly. This, of course, was the zombie plant container, what it came in, and I'm just repurposing it for me little Bonchi chilies. Again, this experiment not going too well yet. Nothing coming up. Now I have just like I'm doing with the other experiment, starting one of each of these every week. We have the March 2nd one's already done, March 9th one's in there. Those I ended up doing quickly after the video was done. So they are planted. We'll see what happens. And of course, the hot pepper brand experiment. Nature's Edge Sustainable Sprout Serenaseed in Rebel Gardens. This is the first, although I've been taking pictures every day just to make sure I know what's going on daily, this is the first update for the gardening blog of what is going on with this hot pepper brand experiment. Those are the habaneros, nothing yet there, which is kind of to be expected, I think, from my own experience of how fast it takes them to grow. Same with the cayenne, nothing there yet. I expected the jalapenos to be the first I would see, and you can see right there, we have our first one. There is a little bit of a close-up, tough to see. My camera doesn't really like to focus all that well, but you can see just barely poking part of its stem out, and that is the Serenaseed jalapeno. Rebel Gardens actually also had one of the jalapenos sprout later on that same day. So the Serenaseed did win the germination speed, but Rebel Gardens not too far behind. And there's a lot of other things, of course, that will be considered in this, not just the germination speed or rate. California Wonder there, nothing going on just yet. Again, our jalapenos, Hungarian hot wax, and our Serrano. All 4 Serrano came up, 3 of the jalapenos there, pretty much everything you saw already from the previous week, but we do have 1 Hungarian hot wax, luckily. I haven't had a whole lot of luck germinating those, so I'm glad to see one of them. And here, kind of my babies, not gonna lie, those old hot peppers from the very beginning that were in those egg cartons that are still surviving, transplanted out into that 6th slot before I put those other peppers in, then transplanted into these little containers to give them a little more space. This is 2 weeks ago now at this point. They're not looking great. As you can see, they only have like maybe 4 leaves, 5 leaves each. They're very scraggly. Now though, last week, looking at them, this is when they had probably about a week or so, probably over a week, maybe almost 2 in these bigger containers. Gave them a very small bit of fertilizer to go with them, just to try to get them going again, see what happens. You can see the Serrano in the middle, the cayennes on the sides. And now, this week, I mean, I kind of changed some stuff around. I gave them, I believe, better supplemental light. I think they're a little closer to the light. They kind of look pretty good. I mean, they're very, very tiny, don't get me wrong, but they kind of look good. And here's just a bunch of the other herbs that I've been growing. You saw pictures of some of these things earlier on from the late January. That would be the dill, the parsley, the cilantro, the thyme. I believe I was also starting the zombie plants around that time, you see there. And I also have these 2, because I couldn't get basil to grow. And I don't have any basil in those small pots that I just showed you. I used these 2 pots that were dying sage. They had sage transplants that died, and I just put basil in both of those, but then forgot which one was which. And that was some tarragon there. That also was just a random planting, and it ended up working out. Here you see 2 weeks ago, I transplanted the thyme. There was 3 thyme growing in that pot. Now I transplanted each into its own pot. The dill as well, there were 5 pieces of dill growing in there. There's now just 3. I'll show you where the other 2 are soon. The cilantro, I think I just thinned that a little bit and then just let it go. And of course then we have some lemon balm. I had some peppermint, but I haven't had much luck with peppermint either. And here again, parsley that was transplanted. See the 1 transplant container. There's the original parsley. There's just still so much of it. There's probably about 5 in there, and I transplanted 3 out that you saw. There's the close-up of the tarragon, which is struggling. You can see all the small seedlings there, and over time it kind of started thinning out, but I guess that's kind of natural. You can see some of them are doing pretty well. So the small ones end up dying off, the big ones get bigger. A couple more pieces of parsley. There was just so much of it. It's all over the place. Ended up with 2 different containers plus the one that started it. Oh, there's actually 4 down there and 2 in that one. That was just the easiest way it was to transplant them out of there without disturbing too much. There again, last week, the cilantro, the dill, it's all, it's not looking great. It's super leggy. It does have some light on it. So you can see the cilantro, the parsley there, it's kind of sticking out straight. It's able to lift itself up a little bit. Lemon balm coming up kind of nicely, I think. You could probably use some thinning out too. Maybe even put it into a bigger pot since it's mint and it'll kind of just take over. There's the thyme, which again I believe is really liking being in its own pots. The one in the original pot that's sticking straight up, probably doing the best, I imagine, but they're all sticking up, so they're all strong enough. Here again last week, still not enough of the true leaves on the basil to tell what they are, but I wanted to start making a guess. I think that one on the left looked more like Italian basil, large leaf. It's the large leaf that gives it away. Here's one more piece of basil that I actually plucked it out of one of those other 2, but it came out so perfectly that I ended up putting it in another pot by itself. And again, of course, forgot which kind it was. So it's in there. We'll figure it out eventually. Tarragon again, slowly thinning itself out. Here was supposed to be, should say 3-9 today. We moved all these little pots over next to the hydroponics, realizing I could utilize some of the light on the sides of that. So all the herbs are over there now. And they're all looking very nice. I think they're liking where they are, their new place. The dill I actually moved a little bit further away from the light because it seemed like it was getting burnt. Not burned, but wilting, dying kind of because of the heat. I'm not sure. So I looked at it again and it was looking a lot better. There again is that singular basil. Still not sure what it is. Now I finally named these. This one looked like Genovese. The one that had less. The one that had more in it does look like the Italian large leaf. You can see the one in the middle has those big thick leaves. Again, the tarragon, again, much thinner. You can almost count how many are there. The parsley, my mounds and mounds of parsley, doing quite well. May even have to just give one of these pots away to somebody soon. And the lovely tricumber, well, the only one that's still surviving. Lovely is probably not the right word for it. 2 leaves left, straggling. It's there, it's still alive. After all of the struggle it went through, you can see all the pieces I took off of it. But it's still growing. Now 2 weeks ago, this is whenever all those herbs were getting transplanted. That's where those other pieces of dill went. I'm using those cups to try to keep them out of the soil. It was working really well. And again now, we have 4 leaves. In that week, we grew, I would say, 1.5 leaves on this cucumber. You can see the very vigorous flower growth all over it. I've been plucking those like crazy because clearly the cucumber is not ready to flower. 5 leaves are not enough. Last week, this dill is just going crazy inside of this pot. It is almost going to be bigger than the transplanted dill, it seems, the way it's growing right now. I mean, it has a lot to catching up to do, but I think it can. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaves there last week. You can see some of the older ones are getting a little, rough, but I don't think that's anything to be too concerned about. It's growing so nice that I'm really not concerned. Again, Look at this dill, almost standing straight up like a tree at this point. If the cucumber fails, at least I know that I have a pot of dill. This one too, it doesn't get as much light, maybe it does, as the one on the other side, but both of them just really loving their new spot. Much more than those other small pots. And this window does get sun almost all day, I would say. So that's again why this cucumber is probably doing so well. The goal was to have a cucumber growing maybe once every month so that we had indoor cucumbers all the time. That is still the plan, but kind of got set back a little bit. But yeah, not bad at all, I would say. Now here's one of my transplants. I have two of them. You saw the oregano. Actually, you saw both of them, I guess, earlier on. This is the spearmint that had flowered again, or came back with its shoots out of every fallen leaf node. Came back with an entire new shoot. And this one right here was actually the top of the original spearmint plant. I just chopped it right off and stuck it in the ground, and it rooted. I think it only had like one real set of leaves, and then the second one was just kind of forming. And that other piece you see is from there, right there. Cut that off. Every time it gets two good sized leaves on the base, and then two sized leaves like that one right there I'm showing you toward the front, I normally say that's about time to cut it off. You can see a better shot of it there from the side. And then you can replant that. Replant those cuttings, those two there. And this is today. On the 9th, you can see I did exactly that. Took that one, took those two long ones off there, and I put them down in this pot by themselves. Very droopy at first, but they're hanging in there. I mean, you can see how tough they are still, even though they're drooping. Watered up. I'm hoping that those two are going to grow. They're kind of stocky, so I'm hoping they'll grow nice and I can use those two as cutting plants. Here are those chives that have been growing for forever. The garlic chives you can see are looking fantastic. The regular chives were planted a little more recently, but they came up really nice. I don't know if there was something, that arugula got eaten, and then most of the chives right afterward either got eaten or just died off. The arugula was what was in the middle of this pot, down that middle strip. But I forewent doing any arugula in there, just went with the chives. And last week, not a whole lot of change, at least not a whole lot you can see. In fact, I take that back. You can kind of tell that the regular chives are chives. At first, it sort of just looks like a bunch of stringy things, flopping all over the place. But now they're kind of, the structure is coming together. As you can see, these garlic chives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there's actually 6 there, but you can actually count them because they're standing up. They're growing like they ought to. You can almost tell that they have a little bulb underneath. And here today, I almost broke that piece of chive, but I think it actually healed itself. It just happens to be on the side of the pot right where my spritzer comes down at, and so I chopped it. Again, the garlic chives, just fantastic. I'm not a big onion fan. In fact, I hate onions. I like garlic. Garlic chives, probably a little too oniony for me, but I know a lot of other people who will love them. And the way they grow, you just can't beat it. I mean, they're so resilient. And now into the garage garden. And here's our new arugula. Grown in a bit of a chillier climate, but still warm enough. I think it would have grown a little better if I didn't start it with the seeds in the colder climate, but I did. And so the seeds had to germinate in this, I don't know, probably 40, 50 degree weather. Not great, but it worked. Probably just took a little longer than usual. In fact, it didn't take very long. It probably only took, I would say, less than a week for germination. But arugula is pretty fast, as you saw that lettuce. Pretty much the same, I think. They both germinate fast. But they're not doing too bad. You can see 4 different spots. I planted 3 in each. I believe I have 3 in 2 of the spots and 2 in the other 2. I had to thin one of them out because it actually got cut at the ankles like my first arugula did, and I'm hoping it wasn't something that was eating the arugula previously, but it doesn't look like it was, because that was the only one I lost, and all the other ones since then have been just doing fantastic. Well, as good as they can do, I guess. You can see that's one of the biggest ones, has 2 true leaves started on it. They are probably much leggier than you want to see arugula, but at this point in my gardening life, I am used to seeing a lot of leggy plants. Here we have a big thing of lemongrass. I basically just scattered it on the top of this used soil, not, lightly used soil. I think it was only used once. It seems like it's pretty rich in nutrients. We've seen some of this soil earlier, stuff just pop out of it like no problem. So you can see there, at first I wasn't sure, a week later if anything was coming up, but here 2 weeks ago, definitely started seeing some action all over the place with these little whitish colored sprouts coming up all over, grass looking sprouts. Called lemongrass. I guess it grows somewhat like grass, but it's not the same, because I do think they get a little bit of a bulbous root to them, almost like onions. And they're a little more edible, probably. Here again, last week, not a whole lot of change. Again, these are growing out in the garage, so it's a little colder. Again, germinated the seeds in the cold, but they didn't really seem to mind, and I don't think they're going to mind as much as the arugula. I think it's going to come up pretty well. Starting to see now today on the camera, you can really pick out all those bigger pieces of lemongrass coming up. And here are more spearmint transplants. This is the one in the garage. I had so many. I actually had that transplant in the oregano pot, and then realized it wasn't oregano, so I put it in this one. I cut it back. It's come back again quite nicely. That small one that's next to it, that just popped up by itself. That's new growth from rhizomes underneath the ground, apparently. I don't know what that thing is. I don't think it's anything. Definitely not mint. Doesn't smell like mint. Again, you can see how well the mint grows back when you cut it. It's nonstop. If there's anything I can grow well, it's mint. But I guess anybody can grow mint well. It pretty much just does it on its own. I even plucked a couple leaves off of that little one, and I was hoping that I would kind of get a nice stocky, bushy mint out of it. But I thought at first I may have harmed it and it was going to just die instead. Unfortunate. I felt that it needed a bit of a different direction with the sun. It's kind of been setting the same way the whole time. You can see how all the leaves are pointed in the one direction. I want to kind of bring them back. But yeah, great growth. And even on this small one, this week I started seeing those little tiny nodes. Might not be able to see it with my crappy camera, but some little leaf nodes, branches starting out of those from those other leaves. We should have a nice little plant going soon. Here's some old aloe I had from whenever I first tried growing some herbs. I think this is actually from my aunt a long time ago. She had some aloe. She had an aloe plant, and I took it. I mean, she was giving away parts of it, so I took one, and that one plant soon turned into what you see here. Turned into, I can't even count how many, 3 pots worth. And this is probably the biggest one right here. Just look how amazing. I love looking at it in the sun. You can see how nice and bright and green the top sort of leaves get. Leaves, if you want to call them. I don't know what you would call them. I guess they are leaves. But here again, it's hard to see too much growth in the aloe. It's a bit much slower, I would say, than most plants, but again, these have been growing for a while. This one too here is also very thick, very chunky. I'm grabbing all those with my hand just to try to give you an idea of how big these are and how chunky they are. You can see, I mean, it's maybe an inch thick on that one. These two, this pot's by far the best. There's 4, I believe, 4 giant aloes growing in that one. I mean, you can see for sure the 4 that are there. The think I just pointed to all 4. Yep. I mean, just look at how chunky this thing is. There's so much. I took a lot of the bottom leaves to try to clean the thing up whenever, some of the wilting ones, maybe a month or so ago. I cleaned, got all the gel out of it. Probably got maybe a quarter of a shampoo bottle full of the gel. I used a shampoo bottle because that was what was available to me. And in fact, I think that aloe is also good for healthy hair. So you could use it as a sort of shampoo, I think, or like a conditioner, maybe. Maybe. Don't quote me on that. But it really doesn't last all that long. I maybe had it in the fridge for a month. That was probably too long. But there's just so much aloe here. At some point, you can see all this nice new growth from this week. I'm actually getting in there and looking at all those new little leaves that are starting. You can see that they're all growing just beautifully. My goal would be at some point this early spring or something maybe to clean up these 3 pots and even transplant all these small ones out and maybe just settle with 3 big ones myself, maybe a big one, a medium one, and a small one for myself, and then give the rest away. It is getting a little crazy in there with all these aloe, but it is really cool to look at. Just gotta see if we can find people that want all these pieces of aloe. I mean, you could probably count 2 dozen altogether. I mean, and even in this one has these 4. I mean, each pot has just a bunch of small aloe that are starting up. It seems to have no problem growing. I think it's maybe a little bit of water every 3 weeks. And here, just a little bit of an update on this grape thing. I don't think it's a weed. Maybe somebody can help me out in the comments, tell me what they think this thing is. I haven't grown enough grapes to know if that's what a grape looks like. And finally, just a couple other things I have growing here. I don't know what this is. It was planted in my first peppermint pot. Clearly not peppermint. I thought this little one might be peppermint. Those seed leaves sort of looked like other mint seed leaves. Again, looking at these things, not quite sure what they are. Finally transplanted them out of the giant pot into just tiny pots because they didn't need much else. This thing kind of looks like some kind of flower. Again, I was using used soil, so it was probably soil that was used for flowers. That's normally what we had growing here before I began my gardening adventure. And that one is now big enough that I know it's not peppermint. So unfortunately, still no peppermint. Some raspberries I started out in the garage. Again, used soil. The raspberry seeds weren't amazing. I didn't really expect a whole lot to happen with this. But I wasn't using this tray, so I figured whatever, I'd throw them in there. I was a little surprised though. It seemed like some of them started coming up. And I only knew that because, as you can see, that leaf right there has a raspberry seed, I believe, still attached to it. So does that one. So I figured they had to be raspberries because those were the seeds I planted. And then eventually, last week, maybe a week or so, a week and a half ago, moved them inside as a couple of the seedlings did sprout, or seeds did sprout. So wanted to give them a little more light, a little more warmth, because raspberries like to germinate in the cold, but I assume they don't want to be cold afterwards. So they're up inside now. I think there's maybe a good 6 growing, if that's actually what they are. If they're actually raspberries, who knows? I'm gonna just be getting, buying transplants of raspberries, blueberries, things like that for this year. But if I can get some things started from seed myself, it's not a bad thing. Again, today looks like probably the same amount growing. There is one though that looks like it has a bit of a spiky leaf to it. There it is. And I don't know if that's what raspberries look like or not. But I have a couple that are looking like that, like a 5-pointed leaf. Here's the zombie plants finally. At first, these are still pretty small. They haven't been growing all too long. But you can see when you touch those ferny leaves, some of them at least, they will fold up and droop like they're dead. They'll play dead because they're zombies. Because zombies play dead. Again, transplanting them out of those tiny pots into my clear plastic cups, which I then realized were not the way to go because you can get algae or moss or something growing inside the cup in the soil, and you don't want that. So I probably won't be using any more of the clear ones. Those are the last two. This is last week. Last two to be transplanted out of their original starting little pots. There's 3 in each of those. Those are the most. I think I planted 3 in each pot, and those are the 2 that had 3 come up. I was kind of concerned about transplanting them because it's hard with 3. Hard enough with 2. Here again, the ones that did get transplanted. I lost one of them, but the other ones all did really well. I don't know if it's normal for most of the ferny leaves to fall off from the bottom, the older ones. I don't know how many they usually keep, but yeah, I don't know. They have maybe 3 nice big ferns. I should say 3 sets because usually they grow in 2s. And here today, finally transplanted all of the zombie plants out. There's one finally showing himself for the camera. Got some chias. These were my nieces and nephews' chia pets that they don't last very long. They needed cleaned out. This one's still going, you can see pretty nicely. And since they were doing those, I figured I would replant my Grogu chia pet. And I gave a little bit of a day-by-day update on how he was growing because, again, he's a chia pet, and chia grows really, really fast. So it's pretty fun, especially, I guess, for the kids to watch watch that growth. Look at that. That's like 3 days maybe, right? And here we have some wild strawberries, which I literally walked outside and pulled out of the ground and then put in this pot because I wanted to see what would happen. Again, I have so many wild strawberries in the yard. I want to try to get as many out and in a certain spot of the yard as I can because I'd really like to use it for some ground cover underneath things like raspberries, blackberries, and my grapes and my apples even. You can plant them underneath a lot of things. I'm not going to put them underneath my blueberries because you can in fact plant low bush blueberries underneath high bush blueberries to work as ground cover, and so that's probably going to be what I go for. I also have a bunch of white clover that I'm going to be putting everywhere else. Basically, it's going to be all my paths. It's going to be clover. Nice nitrogen fixing plant. Here again, last week, these wild strawberries, just those 2 coming up. I'm not sure. I'm thinking about cutting all those old runners and just letting these two strawberries do their thing by themselves, all afresh. You can see all those old runners that I planted coming off of them. But really, these strawberries, those 2 are the only ones that took. The other ones look like they may have. I shouldn't completely count them out because they are still sort of stuck in the ground. You can see that one at the top there, right above the one on the right. Here is a random rosemary. At this point, I had no idea what it was. I had just at this point on the 25th realized what it was because I was able to do this and smell my fingers, and it was, whoa, yep, that's rosemary, all right. That was basil that was planted in it. That was that singular basil. Once I realized it was rosemary in here, I planted that basil somewhere else, obviously because they want pretty much completely different conditions. Rosemary likes the dry, basil likes the wet. Here's 2 more pieces of aloe that kind of fell off. of our other aloe plants. And I figured, I have other pots that I can put them in. Might as well see if they come back or not. That one I was most concerned of, this little curved, tiny one. Really was not looking good at all. I was pretty sure it was dead. In fact, it was just laying on the workbench for a while because, you can see it looks terrible. Does not look like something that's worth keeping. This one really doesn't even look like it's worth keeping, and I keep squeezing it to see if I can feel a little bit more gel building up every day or every week. Trying to see. You can see some of those inside ones do look like they're sort of filling up. That one right there I'm poking. Yeah. And now today, would you look at that? Some nice thick growth, and even on the small one. And that means 2 more aloe. Aloe, very resilient. They're succulent-esque, so very easy to replant. You can even replant the leaves if you're careful enough sometimes. Here is, as you can see, it was actually pickled jalapeno seeds. I just figured, again, not using this tray, I'll throw these seeds in and see if any of them actually germinate. No, they didn't, obviously. Unless some of the very tiny, weird-looking things are somehow those. Mostly what came out are all the clover you see, because that's basically what's in my yard. And there's also this strange-looking thing. I don't know what that is, and this is what I'm most interested in. Looks like some kind of lettuce, but I don't know where it came from. In this leaf too, that almost looks like one of the raspberries that are growing now right next to this tray. So I'm curious if somehow it is a raspberry. Or maybe it's not even close to that. Just another weed. Here's some old houseplant that was here before I started doing my thing, but the original one actually died. This was a shoot coming off of the original one that was still growing. So, replanted it. I think it was dying at first. I overwatered probably. I think I cut back the right amount. And I believe it's hard to tell if there's any new growth inside of that leaf, but at least those 2 leaves are still alive. So there's that. And finally, now, thanks for bearing with me this long. If you're wondering where that sage went, here's the last piece of the 3 that got transplanted. The only one that really lasted at any length of time. But alas, it didn't live either. Unfortunately, no sage yet for me. And finally now, our oregano transplant. Thank you, Teresa, again for the transplants. The oregano just did not want to do it. Thanks guys for bearing with me and sticking through the whole video. If you stayed for this whole time, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for wanting to watch an hour-long video of my vlog. And I will see you next week for more.